Hello and welcome to our Foundations of Open Publishing OER webinar. Happy Open Education Week. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're on. So Athabasca University, obviously as an online university, has a physical space, but it also has people working all across Canada, and we serve people all across Canada. So I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous people, and we honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. All right, so my name is Dan Cocroft. I am the OER librarian here at Athabasca University. And just to give you an idea of what we're talking about today, I'm going to start with an introduction to OER, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Then we're going to talk about creating your own OER or adapting OER. We're going to talk about hosting and distribution, publishing supports, and finally, if there's time afterwards, we'll do a Q&A. So I like to use the UNESCO definition of OER. It's really quite succinct. So open educational resources are learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or are under copyright that have been released under an open license. They permit no-cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation, and redistribution by others. You'll see that I've bolded the word adaptation there very purposefully, because really that's what sets apart OER from open access. So you'll have materials that you can not only share, but for OER, you can adapt them as well, so make changes. So let's start with making OER. So whether you're adapting from something that already exists or making something from scratch, there's quite a few things to think about. So I've split this into several different sections. So writing from scratch, adapting, the publishing formats you might want to think about, some accessibility considerations, and then other best practices. So if you're thinking about making OER absolutely on your own from no basis of anything else, make sure that you check first that OER it doesn't already exist in the subject matter. Sometimes there will be content out there that is somewhat relevant that you can change and make it work, or there is content that is close enough that you could make something work, or chapters or parts of it to put together. So really, you want to make absolutely sure that you're not wasting your time and doing something that's been already done. If you can't find any resources that are close to your subject matter, make sure to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help and take another look. I have some great search techniques that I'll be happy to share with you. If you attended our last session, we went over some of those. So also remember that you can use parts from other OER. Just because a text or an image or a video or an audio doesn't exactly fit your needs, remember you can take parts of those and use it the way you want, because they're licensed in such a way that you can make derivatives. Like I mentioned, you can also openly license images, videos, and audio files that you create. Another thing to keep in mind is the future of your work. So where are you keeping those source files? Will they disappear, for example, if a server goes down? What happens with them beyond your work? Let's say you leave your position. What kind of software are you using to write? This is a big one, because you can save yourself a lot of headache if you're not writing within some proprietary software or some formats that aren't widely accepted. I always recommend use Microsoft Word if you can, or a equivalent like Google Docs, some kind of basic text editor. When we're talking about making your own OER, there's a lot of complications around copyright and IP, which is intellectual property. So let's get a little basis of that down. So the first thing to know is that only copyright holders determine license terms. So you have to own the work in order to decide how that work might be used. A work that you produce is instantly protected by Canadian copyright law, so the Canadian Copyright Act, provided that you fix it in a format. So just because you have an idea of something doesn't mean you own that. Once you, let's say you have this idea for a presentation and then you make the presentation files, once it's fixed in that format, the copyright then belongs to you. So those are very traditional copyright protections, like no one can take your stuff and share it without your permission. They can't make money off of it, etc. Now, an exception to this rule is when an employer chooses to protect the intellectual property produced in the course of work. So they would argue that since they're employing you and paying you to do a job, that the material you're producing actually belongs to them. So at AU, that exception applies. So we have an intellectual property policy. It has different sections for different types of work. So, for example, if you are doing some creative work in your spare time, that work belongs to you, full stop. If you are doing research as a part of your duties, that's an area of shared responsibility, but usually you would own the copyright to that work. But when it comes to teaching and learning materials, so example would be a textbook. If you make a textbook that you teach from, that belongs to the university. So you might be the author, but the copyright would belong to the university. And like we said before, whoever holds the copyright makes decisions about licensing. So before you create your own OER, before you start that huge process, make sure that you're legally allowed to license it. All that being said, if you do end up making something that you don't own the copyright to and you can't make licensing decisions, you can still request an open license. And that process is ongoing. We're still developing that. So just contact me and I'll be happy to take a look for you. So let's say you have made an OER from scratch. You have the permission, the ability to apply a license, so you own the copyright. You get to choose the license terms. So in the OER world, we use a system called Creative Commons. And these licenses have sets of 4 different permissions here that you make very clear to the general public using it. So while a traditionally copyrighted work won't have any permissions, you must request those permissions. Here, this is basically a shortcut saying, hey, if you use my work, you can use it in this way, or you can't use it in this way. For all Creative Commons licenses, we have attribution. So that's represented by a little person in a circle and the letters BY. So what that means is anytime someone uses this work or reuses it, they must cite you. They must make sure that you are attributed for that original. You can also specify that your work is not to be made money off of. So you can say non-commercial. Please don't take my work and make money off of it. I say please, but really it's a legal requirement. Share alike specifies that whatever license you choose, don't change that license. If you want to adapt my work, that's fine. Just don't change the license. So don't make it more restrictive and don't make it more open. Finally, we have no derivatives, ND, and this is represented by an equal sign. So this really is the line between open access and OER. If you have a work that has the no derivatives license term on it, this means that the work cannot be altered, cannot be remixed. So it's no longer an OER. Moving on, let's talk about adapting OER. This is the most common way people use OER and make their own. What do I mean by that? So I mean to adapt an OER is to make changes to an existing work. So this can include all kinds of things, including localization or translation. So say you want to make your own AU edition, or you find a great textbook out there that you want to teach in a French language class. You could translate it. You can make changes to structure. You can move some chapters around. You can improve clarity of the writing if you just write a different way. You can obviously fix grammar issues, all those sorts of things. In addition to adding things, like other chapters, new images, and audio, interactives, that type of thing, you can also remove things. So if something is licensed in such a way that lets you make derivatives, then you could take out a chapter. You could take out paragraphs, anything you wish. Another common adaptation is to make accessibility improvements. So you'll find a great work that is in all other ways perfect, but needs like alt text or something like that. That's quite common. Format shifts are another one. Let's think of an example. So one of the major OER publishers is OpenStax. Now they have their books available to read online, download as PDFs, and I think EPUBs as well. Could be wrong on that. But sometimes people want to move that to a text format, so like a Word document, so that they can make changes themselves. So they'll make that format shift thanks to the license. So once you've adapted an OER, this new work, it's authored by you, but it's licensed according to what is permitted by the original. We call this an adapter's license. So typically, you can't make a work more open, but you can make it more closed. So you could add a restriction, like, for example, you could take a CC BY work, let's say a textbook. It's really openly licensed. You make some changes to it, and you add a non-commercial clause and re-release it. So that would be an adapter's license. And the caveat to that is that any works with the share alike license obviously means they're locking that in place. You can't change it. You can't make it more restrictive. So just to give you some ideas of ways you might want to combine resources. So like I said, maybe you like parts of an OER, but not all of it. You can mix and match different chapters, sections, entire books. The world is your oyster. And also don't forget that images, audio, video can be remixed too. So if those are openly licensed, you can make collages. You can re-edit a video with your own choice of sound that is also openly licensed. You could add a crackling fireplace sound to your slides or something like that. And the great part about it is you don't have to worry about copyright infringement. Just don't forget to cite. Here's where it gets complicated. So when you're mashing those different elements together, those different OERs, you want to make sure that the licenses are compatible. So the traditional example is you want to combine chapters from two different OER or more, but they have different licenses. So how do you determine what license to release the whole textbook as, and is this allowed? So this chart will help you kind of figure that out. And it is complicated, so always don't hesitate to reach out to me. You'll see at the bottom there and the far right-hand side, we have the no derivatives licenses. So these are combinations of the different permissions. The no derivatives obviously can't be combined with anything else. That's why all the X's are there, because they have a no derivative clause. You can't make any changes. You'll notice that the share alike is a little bit complicated too. So the CC by SA, you can combine that with something that's more open like CC by, and something with the same license, CC by SA, but you couldn't combine it with something that has CC by and C, simply because one is stating that, hey, I want you to release this. If you adapt it, if you want to re-release it, you have to release it under the same license. So you can't add a non-commercial clause. Now, another way you can think about different ways to combine OER is smoothies and TV dinners. So people like to use this comparison. So when you're making OER, you can think about remixes and collections. Now, remixes are kind of like taking those individual pieces. So let's say you're taking different paragraphs from different works, and you're putting them in a blender, and you're blending them all together, and you've got a smoothie with tiny little parts inside. They're mixed to make a new whole. So it's not like a salad or fruit salad, it's a smoothie. It's its new thing. You can see all those licenses are compatible. Let's see, are they? They indeed are, because each one has the non-commercial. Another thing you can do, if you find a bunch of material that you like to combine that aren't compatible, is you can make a collection. So a collection is those distinct pieces without making changes to the individual pieces. Let me try and be more clear about this. So, for example, a collection of images. If you are specifying that each image has its own license, then you can combine them together regardless of the sorry, I lost my train of thought. You can combine them together regardless of the individual licenses. So let's use that same example again of grabbing different paragraphs from different books. They all have different licenses. You can't, let's say they're incompatible. You can't release that new paragraph, that chapter with all these different paragraphs, and say that it's its own distinct thing. No, it's actually a collection of different things. So since they're incompatible, you just need to attribute each different section. That's a collection. Yeah, I'm sorry that that's a bit confusing, but give me a shout if you're ever curious. So studying OER is its own sort of can of worms. In the OER world, we use this acronym TASL. So that is title, author, source, and license. So I used the example here of Read, Think, Write by Pam Chamberlain and Adine Doblbauer. So this is a title that we just released through the OER Publishing support program through AU Press under the Remix imprint. And I thought like this would be a good example to show about what it would look like to adapt a work. So the adapter's attribution would look something like this. If I took this book, made some changes to it, re-released it, I would call it Dan's Writing Book. Then I would have the author, which is myself, And then I have the source. So the source in this case is another textbook. So it's adapted from Read, Think, Write, Writing in University. Then you have the author, and then you have the source, and then the license. An important thing to remember is that you need to hyperlink the source so people can find the original work, and hyperlink the license so people can look at those license terms. When it comes time to release your work, whether that's done from scratch or adapted, you want to think about all kinds of publishing formats. So a very common one is PDF. It's super supported, but there might be some accessibility issues. A lot of screen readers struggle with PDFs as they're basically images. docx, some people release their OER as docx files. That really encourages adaptations for other people to take the file and make changes. But the problem is that's not a great format to serve your work as a reading platform. EPUB is becoming the standard for OER. It really is one of the best, I would say, because it's reflowable, meaning if you are using a phone, if you're using a tablet or your computer, it's not going to look strange. It's going to reflow to the size of your device. If you're having, if you want to make the text bigger, for example, you can do that and it wouldn't break anything. Now that does require a EPUB reader, so you can get free software on your computer or an app on your phone or tablet. So that might be a restriction for some. The other really popular one is online reading platforms. It's probably the most popular right now. So Pressbooks is a big place to read OER. The downside to these is they're not available offline. But the upside is that there's minimal technical expertise required. So obviously no login screens, no software needed. It's essentially just a website. So what is the answer to the right publishing format? Well, I would say it's probably a combination of a bunch of these. So depending on what you can support. Now we can talk a bit about accessible OER. Now, I wish I could do an entire presentation on this, and I might just do that if there's enough interest, because I'm really just touching the surface here. But there's all kinds of ways that you can make your OER more accessible. If you are releasing a video under an open license, make sure you're releasing video captions or a transcript to help those who are visually impaired. If you have images in your OER, make sure you're supplying some alt text. So when people hover their mouse over it or using a screen reader, a description of the image is available. Use a hierarchical structure. So what I mean by that is if you are using Word or Google Docs or something like that, make sure you're using the built-in text formatting. So if you have a title, format as a title. Don't just make the text bigger. If you have different sections, use headings. Heading 1 for your top structure, heading 2 for your second sub-concept, etc. This helps folks with screen readers skip through content, so they don't have to listen to every single line as they're trying to get to the right place. When you're creating images or including other images in your work, make sure they have appropriate color contrast. So those with low color contrast might be really difficult for folks with vision uh, concerns or challenges. You might also want to think about using descriptive links. So this is something I think we all kind of fall into and do by accident all the time. We'll write an email, for example, and we'll say, click here. Or writing a resource or a guide or something like that. where you're just using the word like click here, or very nondescript ways to describe where you're going. So, for example, you might want to instead say, click here to visit this website on X, just to make it super clear for those folks using screen readers. Outside of accessibility, there's also a few other best practices that are great to consider. So one of those is quality. So I like to pose these questions for folks making their own OER in particular. How are you encouraging feedback on your OER? So are you putting it somewhere where people can leave reviews? Are you working with others to examine the quality of your work? Are you inviting peers to that process? Or are you kind of just working in your own bubble? How will you measure success? So it's very easy to have your own goals for what you want an OER to look like, and what you want it to end up as an end product, but you might also want to think about student outcomes as a way to measure success. After all, that's why you're creating these resources in the first place. When you're sharing OER around, it's really important to also consider if your metadata is descriptive. The more descriptive it is, the easier it is to find. Another area of best practice is sustainability. So ask yourself, will the work need updating in the coming years? Who will update it and when? So some works are more static than others. So for example, maybe there's not that many advancements in algebra coming out. I don't know, it could be. Whereas a political science textbook obviously would change quite a bit as the years go by. So make a plan for who is going to update it, when those updates happen, and ask yourself, where is the OER hosted? So what happens if that place disappears? Is it in multiple places? And who has access to those editable files? You want to make sure that people who do want to adapt your work can do so easily. All right, so let's talk a bit about hosting and distribution. So sharing your work with the world means making it available beyond just your institution. So when I talk about hosting your OER, this is where people will access your OER at your institution. So usually this is an institutional repository, a provincial repository, or a university webpage. If we talk about distributing your OER, this is where a global audience is going to have access to your work. They're going to reuse it as the license you have placed on it allows. Each repository or database will have its own requirements. So a lot of them will ask for a PDF and editable file because they want to make sure people can reuse it. If you end up creating an OER and you're not sure where to put it, feel free to email me and I'm happy to do that work for you. All right, we're just about wrapping up here. I'm going to talk a bit about some resources available to you here at AU. So in 2020, we launched the OER Publishing Support Program. So this initiative provides support for all kinds of things related to textbook publishing, project management, copy editing, typesetting, design, file conversion, and it's basically funding for openly licensed resources used in AU courses. We have a real focus on textbooks at the moment, but we're really open to all kinds of ideas. All these OER are published under Athabasca University's press remix imprint, and it's listed on the AU Press website. After this presentation, I will send out a link to the recording and a list of links to all the resources. A few other resources I wanted to mention were the OER LibGuide, which is a one-stop shop for everything happening at AU and the basics of OER. I also offer an OER finding service. So I know that OER is hard to find a lot of the time because people will re-release editions with different names, that sort of thing. But I've got my nose into it, so I can definitely do that work for you. Just send me a description of what you need or the course outline, something like that. You can always contact me for a one-on-one OER chat. That's what I'm here for, so happy to do that. And finally, I wanted to share AU's OER by discipline guide. So this is a resource I created just this year, actually, end of last year. And it's a collection of different OER by different disciplines. I've matched that to AU's offerings. So you can go into the OER by discipline guide and you can search your course code and you can see what I've suggested as alternative texts for this particular courses. You can also browse it by subject. So it's a great place to get started to see what's out there. Since I have you, I'm going to plug our next session of our Open Community Practice, and that is on March 13th at noon in Mountain Time. So we'll be featuring Kristen Rodier, and she's going to tell us about her experience going through the OER Publishing Support Program. So bring your questions, and I look forward to seeing you there. Finally, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Like I said, you can contact me at dcocroft@athabascau.ca or at oer@athabascau.ca. Thanks for coming, and again, happy Open Education Week. Take care.